All right, welcome to another episode of Politely Pushy. I'm your host, Eric Chemi. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. I have known her for a long time. She's had a great career on that technology marketing industry. I'm bringing in Kasey Byrne from Full Point Marketing. Kasey, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too, Eric. We have known each other a long time, and it's been terrific.
From the Cardlytics days when you were over there and I was working at Bloomberg, and you've done a lot. You did a lot before that. You did a lot at Cardlytics. They've become such a huge player. They were at the time an unknown company, and now they're so big, so massive. And you were there in that really critical phase for them.
I was. It was great. You know, when I joined, the then CEO Scott said, "Listen, we just don't have really any marketing. We've done some of it, but this is the time." And we got to do some really great stuff, like recreated the brand and the logo and the messaging, all of the pieces that make it and we got to do a lot of work in creating the category because at the time, nobody really knew what card-linked marketing was. And now it's an entire category. So it was a great time to work on a brand.
I remember how many times you had to explain to me, this is what card-linked marketing is. This is what it means. This is why it's different than getting a coupon. It's a different feeling that somebody has when it comes through their card rather than when it comes in as a quote discount. So I remember you had explained it all to me, and now I see it when I open up my Chase app on the phone.
Yeah.
I see those little offers at the bottom, like, oh, I remember how it started.
You know what I remember when I first explained it to you, it was definitely part of the ethos at the time was, you know, the first few times it took me, it took like not quite 5, 6, 7 minutes to explain what it was. And that's just too long. Right. But by the end of the time when I was there, it was crisper. We could explain what the value proposition was, like people would understand it better. And that was the really cool thing about creating a category, is going from the complicated explanation to, oh, I get it.
So you are an interesting background because you have an electrical engineering degree. Then you went to MIT for your business degree. So you have Cornell and MIT, and you were a technologist before you got your MBA from MIT. So how important is it for you that you were technical? How important is it, you think, for someone in your role to be a technical person, not just a traditional marketer?
So I actually think it's super important, and I feel like that's hard, right? Because if you don't go into engineering because you don't want to study engineering, right? Like I went into engineering because I loved math. It was my favorite subject in high school, and I didn't want to be a math teacher. So engineering seemed like the good thing. I loved studying engineering. I felt like it was interesting and logical, and you get to do all this advanced math. It was really great. And then what I discovered is that being an engineer is a little different than studying engineering. Like the problems that in engineering that I found really interesting were, I don't want to say interpersonal problems, but they were really business problems. Like, why are we working on this? And is this computer that we're working on actually meet the needs of the market we want to talk to? And how do we get these three teams to work together in a way that was really accelerates the development of the technology? And so that's why I went to business school, as I realized that all of these interesting problems were things that weren't necessarily just engineering problems, and they weren't of interest to most of my engineering colleagues. So what I do now is primarily work with technology companies in marketing. And I think it's really super important that I have that interest in technology, that I want to know how it works, that I love the math, right? That quite early this morning, actually, California time, I was participating with a client on one of their onboarding, which is really how to build the technology they're working on. And, you know, I feel like that's a touchstone to be able to communicate what the value proposition is, that it's really hard to market something or talk about something if you don't really understand the pain point and understand it in a kind of a visceral way, not like, oh, I understand that this solves this problem, but holy cow, this technology makes a difference in the developer experience. And so for my jobs, like the companies that I tend to work with, I feel like it's really critical that I have that core, right, and that passion.
Do you think other marketers are not technical enough?
Oh, some are. You know, so I definitely have met people, and you know what? No disrespect, right? There are plenty of really technical companies that you can be pretty senior in marketing and not really be able to demo the product. I just don't think I'm very good at it, and I tend to attract, you know, partially maybe that's who I hire. I tend to attract pretty technical people to my marketing team. As a matter of fact, one of my one of my hires a couple of years ago, who's just really great person, really good marketer. She would work on, we were doing product marketing, so she would work on recent demos and writing blog posts about the newest features in the product. And she regularly found mistakes and things that needed fixing. And once, semi-seriously, the head of engineering tried to hire her away from me. Like he was kidding, but he wasn't really. He kind of was like, we could have a role for you. And I was like, no, she's mine.
Do you ever think you're on the wrong side of the table in meetings when you're speaking with the technologist and you're on the marketing side? Do you ever think I should be on the other side, like you just mentioned about your board?
No, and here's why. Technology, particularly engineering, just digital engineering or or developer tools, which is primarily where I've spent the last sort of 8 or 10 years. They develop so quickly. That I don't feel like I have I have credibility in the marketing side, but I couldn't be in engineering and I have to say, something I have wanted to do for about 5 years, and my colleagues and my family consistently talk me out of it, is I keep saying I want to take 3 months, quit everything, and do one of those boot camps. Maybe a couple of them, like I want to dev up. Yeah, like because I know how to code, but I'm like, modern stack, right? Like how I'm not really that up on the modern stack. Wouldn't it be great to go do that? But every time I say that to someone, they're like, Kasey, just stop, right? But I do feel like that, again, that level of interest, because I am totally serious that if I could find the time in my calendar, I would go do that. That interest is pretty important to my job.
Do you ever go back and think, okay, if I knew I was going to end up in marketing, maybe I would have gotten a different major, a different degree, or would have gone through a different path?
So that's a pretty interesting question. I do think that sometimes, and not so much on marketing, but it's turned out that in my life, like a real attention to spoken and written language and how you talk about things and how you best communicate has been like really interesting to me. And so, yeah, maybe I think that something more in English language arts might have been really fun. But that's in the same category of, part of me wishes I'd become a doctor, and part of it, I don't know. There's just like all these interesting things in life, right, that I could have done. But no, for what I do right now, I wouldn't have changed it.
It's funny you mentioned the boot camp, or maybe you could have been a doctor. I noticed, you look at your profile, your resume, like when I talked to you at Cardlytics, that was several jobs ago at this point. There's a lot of movement in your profile. Do you get bored telling the same story over and over again?
I don't know if I get bored, but I would say that for sure, my career, clearly I am better suited to a really early stage company. Right. I've tried a couple of times to go work for big companies. It seems like a really good idea, but I'm clearly happiest at the beginnings, right? And the nature of early stage companies is 2 or 3 years at an early stage company is a really long time, right? You can go, the amount of things you can do in a couple of years at a Series A or other early stage company is all over the place. Like you can live an entire lifetime of marketing in a couple of years. And so I don't think so much that I get bored as much as I'm tolerant of the chaos. And that's kind of the nature of early stage companies. It's exciting. That's what I like.
Or you like the chaos, because as soon as they mature, the chaos goes away, and now you're bored without the chaos.
That's possible. I suppose that's possible. I have been told a lot of times that I am more tolerant of chaos than the average person. And as
or you're seeking chaos, because some people, they are risk-seeking people.
I don't know. I don't think so, but that's a perfectly fair interpretation.
But I understand, because I had a friend, he worked at Twitter for 18 months, and he said it felt like many years there.
It definitely does, right? The speed, I have this theme of marketing at the speed of technology. Things have to happen super duper fast. And at an early stage company, it's not lack of great ideas that gets you into trouble. It's knowing which of your many great ideas you should do. Every morning you wake up and you have 20 things. I have 20 things I have to get done today, or the world's going to, in a handbasket, right? Every day. And then I'm going to think of 20 more before lunchtime, right? And I can only get 3 of them done, 4, I don't know, whatever it is, right? It's a question of prioritization and tolerance to keep your eye on the ball, given that you're constantly interrupted. And this is why I think I'm good at this, is I have 4 children. So I'm completely familiar with getting interrupted and never finishing a thought.
It's funny, that was going to be my next question, because there's a
Really?
story about you. It exists online, and it says how you, being a mom of 4 kids, it was what allowed you to take a time out. There was a meeting that was going awry, and you said, let's all pause. And it was because I have 4 kids, I could see this was a toddler tantrum happening, not a marketing or technical or business
big technical. Yeah, no, I do say with no tongue in cheek that I have lots of education and skills, but in my gut, all of my management comes from being a mom. Like, my gut instinct on how to manage situations and how to manage people is entirely because, I have a bunch of children, right? I call it my mommy MBA, right? And that particular story is just that it was, it's one of those meetings that we've all been in. It was a postmortem after a very, 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 very painful product launch, as occurs, right?
As they all are, right?
As they are, right? And it was just going really badly, right? Like, everybody, and it was just, and everybody's shoulders were up around their ears, and it was just terrible. And I looked around and I was like, we need a timeout, right? We really did. And I only know that in my gut, because when you see a child or a teenager, right, have a tantrum, you have just a teeny bit of distance to see the perspective and say, oh, no disrespect, we all just need to go take a breather. And so I kind of suggested a break to the meeting, and I'd say that everybody scattered like a bag of marbles, right? Like, everybody went, somebody went got coffee, and somebody went out and smoked, and somebody went and finished their email, whatever it was.
But nobody was next to each other. They were all
they were like, they were all in their corner, right? And then 15 minutes later, we got back together, and everybody had taken some complete breaths, and the meeting went a lot better. And it was the only reason I remember in that meeting just being kind of pushy about, we need a break. But I only had the kind of courage to do that because I knew that this was going to work, and I only knew it was going to work because I had a lot of kids, right? And I had practiced it. So.
How do you work in these high growth, early stage tech startups while being a mom of so many kids? It's because each of those is a full-time job. How do you have 2 full-time jobs for so many years?
I do have a lot. I tell people that at any given day or week, I can be a really good employee, or a really good mom, or a adequate wife, right? Right?
So one of those.
Yeah, you have to choose. And I do think that everybody with lots of jobs has to figure out, you navigate, and it's not always perfect. I would say that if I were giving advice to someone of younger children, I would say to have a little faith in yourself. It's not this week matters, but really it's the long term that matters, right? Like, you're going to be there for your children over their lives, and you should have faith that you'll be there when you need them, even if you're not there every minute, right? And the same thing's true with your career. If you get a lot out of your career, and I feel like I am better around my kids when my job is going well. Like, I feel like otherwise I'd be managing them, right?
Right, you're distracted enough doing work that you leave them alone a little bit.
There's some distance, right?
Yeah.
And then I get very close with my work friends. Like, work is a very compelling activity with other people, right? It's very intimate. So, but you just have a little faith, right? Over time, your career is going to be your career. It's going to be good sometimes and bad sometimes. Sometimes with the kids, you're going to have more time for them or less. It's not. You have time. You have a little optimism.
So you've done all these different types of jobs, right? You worked at McKinsey, you've had your own firm, you have your own firm, you've worked in-house for clients, you've done all these different things for these high growth tech firms, these startups, these, pre-IPO companies that certainly we're dealing with a lot with the BoSpar. Who is the right type of partner? Because you've seen all those different angles.
Yeah. So that's a fair question. Let me think about that. So I'd say the best for a marketing PR, right? The best person is a a senior person who has strong opinions about what they want to see, probably in outcomes, but is very open to not knowing how to get there.
Wait, so say that again. Can you?
Yeah. So that, very clear about what they want. I want more recognition among this group of people for my company, or I need to see growth in this metric. Right. Really clear, crystal clear about what they believe the marketing is intended to do. Because the fact is, with marketing in particular, you could boil the ocean, and there are 100 things you could do at any given minute, right? Money and time. But open to the idea that they don't necessarily know how to get there, right? That would be my job, is to sort of say, okay, so what if what you want is this? These are the 3 things that are going to work, and these are the 3 things that aren't going to work. And the best partnerships are when you have that clarity of direction so that you know where you're going, but openness to accepting advice on how to get there.
How are you seeing right now the current intersection of PR, advertising, marketing, media? They're all mixing together. And that balance, that formula is very different than 5, 10, 15 years ago. How are you seeing this right now, that combo, to help achieve these goals for tech companies?
Yeah, it depends on the client, really. And I think that's a really fair question. Like marketing is 100% different than it was 15 years ago, right? It was kind of all about brand, and you didn't really have any idea what was going on in performance marketing, and it was very handcrafted. So you didn't have any of the marketing automation that was really helping you leverage. I do feel like that's caused, I don't know, the problem is the wrong term. The focus on performance marketing, I feel like I've been arguing against for 5 or 8 years now, which is, we can do some performance marketing and tie it to leads, but we can't actually measure a lot of paid media in particular and how it affects brand in the long term.
Do you think there's an overemphasis on performance marketing because some data exists, so we might as well make everything data driven? Now the data has become the holy grail, and you're the, Mrs. MIT over here saying, wait a minute, we've gone too far on the data side. Is that
no, I think that's very fair. And I really hesitate to say that because I'm all about numbers. Let's do it. But ultimately, if all you're going to get, it is true, you what you measure you can manage. But if you only manage what you can measure, you're then left with all of this other stuff that we know works in aggregate, but isn't going to be measurable. And so you get this, I'm only going to do things that have a specific ROI. And you're like, all right, we can do that. And let me tell you the implications of not doing unmeasurable advertising, right?
This reminds me of, as you know better than I do, because your kids are in school, this whole push to more testing. And we got to teach kids to the test, and all the test scores have gone up, but have the kids actually learned less in the long run than in a world 20 years ago where they didn't have as many tests? Is it sort of like that with marketing?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. I mean, we've talked before about, I have kids in various AP classes, right? And it is really striking how I laugh that I have twins in high school. So we have like a science experiment going, right? Like I know, and in a couple of classes, one will be in the AP version of the class and the other one won't, because they're very different people, right?
Well, are they identical twins or fraternal twins?
No, they're fraternal, so they're not anything alike. But it's like they're the same school, the same age, everything.
Right.
So what's noticeable is that the AP classes of like what is technically the same topic, very focused on what's in the test. Right. It's all like the curriculum is completely back-ended from the test. And that's not necessarily wrong, right? But it's really different than the non-AP version, which is just the subject matter and more, feels more related to whatever the teacher at the time thought was important. And, and particularly in history classes, sometimes there are current events that come in that are just not, in the test. So I think that's not a bad analogy. And I'm torn, right? Like but for sure, I in marketing, an over focus on measurement, which I totally understand coming from a technical founder, right? Technical founders, like, I want to see where the measures are. And I'm like, well, okay, so we did increase, for example, as a company, we increased an enormous amount of traffic to the website. This is great. Well, prove to me which one of the things you did drove that traffic. And I'm like, well, 80% of the traffic is organic, so we're never going to know. I'm laughing as I say this because I know how unsatisfying a statement that is, right?
Yeah, that's tricky. So going the opposite way, storytelling. So we'll move away from data. How important is storytelling in technology right now? Because there are so many companies that they are invisible. They're intangible. There's nothing I can hold, see, touch, smell. I can't pick it up. There's no product beyond their code that's hiding in the cloud. All they've got is their storytelling right now.
Right. I definitely feel storytelling is critical in a technology company. If you can't tie together the features into a way that sounds like a compelling solution to a known problem. And that's harder than I find it harder than it sounds. It seems like if you've built the product, you should be able to tell the story. The other thing that I see that is just alarming might be the right term. I don't know. If you go to 5 companies in a single space that solve sort of the same problem, their stories, like their websites are almost indistinguishable sometimes.
Yes, they are all the same. And certainly coming from the journalist point of view, I'm like, I don't know, they all seem the same to me. I can't tell the difference.
I can't tell the difference.
Who's bigger? I don't know who's better. I don't know who's first. I don't know anything.
I don't know. Yeah. And that is really hard, particularly in enterprise software. It's almost like, it feels like a formula, right? It's always blue. there's always a large kind of aspirational value proposition right above the fold.
You mean the websites, like the sites all look the same, right? It's like they're all copy and pasted. Yep. Yeah.
It's really hard. I live for that. I live in fear of doing that to one of my clients.
And when you look in the tech space right now, what are the storylines just overall when you read in the press that are not getting enough attention?
Oh, so, I think there's a nuance. So I would say the developer message. I work mostly in the developer space, so that's where I'm going to talk for the next few minutes, right? I think that the importance of the developer in a technology decision is very well understood, right? It's the developer's stupid, right? You have to focus on that, and that's been true for a while. I think that there's a nuance between combining the needs of a developer and their role in buying the software, particularly if it's a big purchase, that we don't get, as an industry, we don't do a very good job of. And I feel like there are companies out there doing really interesting, creating really great software that is very self-serve, that is really very developer purchasable. And we're not doing a great job of, the companies I see are not collectively doing a great job of not putting the developer experience first, but the developer as buyer isn't as a well-trod path. We call that the user chooser. And it's very hard to get that right.
User chooser, that's good.
Right. So the idea of the developer is the user, and how do we talk to them? There are lots of things you can do there, but it's an understood path. But how do you talk to the user chooser in the B2B space? Because they're usually pretty different people.
I like that, the user chooser. And then I flip the other way. What are the storylines that you just see are being over and over and overly discussed right now, that you're just so tired of it, and that it's not that important?
Yeah, I used to call this the gallium arsenide story, right? I don't know, back in the day with chips, the gallium arsenide was going to take over silicon any minute now for 20 years, right? It was always any minute now, right? I think data is the new oil continues to be really a painful one for me. I think there's some interesting stuff.
You don't like data is the new oil? You don't like that?
I don't. I just, I'm a privacy nerd, and it just makes me nervous. I like the new emphasis on DevOps, right? Maybe changing the subject slightly. It's kind of a very appreciated portion of tech these days. But yeah, I think the one I can't, AI, I work in the AI space a good amount, and that's become such a painful term. Machine learning AI is just like this, I'm going to fix the world with it. Maybe it's similar to, if we have enough data, we'll solve it. Now there's, if you have enough data scientists, we'll solve it. It's very old.
So it's all that, all those classic problems. Tell me about the data, the privacy stuff. You said you're a privacy nerd. So what are you doing yourself to maintain that privacy? Or what do you advise companies to do to help maintain their privacy, especially in a world where everything's in the cloud? Everything's not even on your own computer.
Yeah, so I'm not that kind of privacy nerd. I'm a privacy nerd in the sense that an individual, and so I like the main thing I do is I'm that person at every company who's like, no, we are going to follow GDPR to the letter.
Okay.
Right. We just are, and I know it's really frustrating and a pain in the neck, and you take this enormous hit on a bunch of metrics that feel important at the time. Yeah.
You'd rather not risk getting in trouble down the road later.
Well, also it's just, I don't know, like I actually, to some extent when it comes to advertising, I'm an anti-privacy nerd because I've worked in advertising long enough that, a good piece of advertising that's actually targeted to me is just fine.
Like
right?
card-link marketing, right?
Like card-link marketing. Like I used to tell, one of the things that's absolutely true in advertising is that I run, right? And so when I buy a new pair of running shoes from Zappos, because every 6 months. So I go buy a new pair of running shoes, and I can promise you that the 2 weeks after I purchase a pair of running shoes is when I see, without question, the most ads for running shoes. Right? That is exactly the wrong time.
They missed it. They should have been 2 weeks,
2 weeks
before. You bought.
Right, exactly. And so for me, I just think that's incompetent. It annoys me, right? But I think there's from a privacy standpoint, I don't mind seeing the ad. If the ad were appropriate, right? And I can clear my cache and take care of it if I don't want to see them. It's really, there are just lots of things you can do in terms of buying lists and enriching data that I'm fine with, but I just the laws are there for a reason. You should have a choice as an individual.
Who are the winning companies that you look at right now that you think are doing a great job? Who do you want to emulate? Who do you tell your clients and your employers, these are the people we should be following?
Well, that really depends on the industry. The industry technology being a broad industry,
so many parts of it.
There are so many parts of it, right? I'm very fond of Lightspeed. They seem to do. Maybe I'm just very interested in their technology because I do think that sort of logging traces is a pretty interesting space. Observability, I think, is the category that they follow. Yeah. They seem to have just a very steady message with a very steady set of discussions. I am pretty consistently impressed with MuleSoft also. Now they're part of Salesforce, so maybe it's a little harder to tease apart their message. But when they were starting, I really loved how they just had a very nice, consistent tone, and you could understand where they were and what space they were in. Nice, both those categories too. Also very nice senior leadership, thought leadership. So you a really super technical brand that somehow you could associate a person with, which I admire.
And then lastly, before we go, what are the advice that you give, mistakes that you've made to some of the younger people coming up in tech marketing? What are you saying to them about, these are lessons that I learned and these are the mistakes that I made on my career path?
Biggest mistakes. So I'm going to go back to marketing, as you can do almost anything, right? Marketing is I used to have a spreadsheet of every form of marketing I could imagine, like everything from celebrity, like every kind of thing I could think of. And I think that the desire to boil the ocean is really high. In a small company in marketing, there are just so many things you can do. For sure, if I in my career was able to have the discipline to remind myself to do one or two things really well rather than 7 things poorly, that would have been an enormous thing for me to learn earlier in my career. And I think I don't know, that just feels like a marketing thing, right? You'd always think of 3 other things you have to do. And it's really more impactful to do 1 or 2 things well.
Yeah, that's the tricky lesson indeed, right? Everyone wants to do so many things. There's so many options and you don't know which one's going to work. So you try to do a little bit of all of them and then none of them work.
And then none of them work.
None of them work, but it's hard to pick what's that one thing. If I can only do 1 or 2 things really well, I don't know what that thing is. So I don't want to limit myself, but Yeah, that's a good one. That's a tough one for all the younger marketers out there trying to figure that one out. I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. I'm sure you're glad that you don't have to deal with it anymore because you've already figured out what you're good at and what you don't want to mess with, other than those boot camps. But
maybe it's like life is a work in process, right?
Yeah. Kasey, I really appreciate the time. Very thoughtful, insightful conversation. This was fantastic.
It was always good talking to you, Eric.
All right, Kasey Byrne, thanks for joining us here on Politely Pushy. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.